about the impacts of putting these chemicals into the atmosphere and doing these experiments on agriculture, crop production, watersheds, any of this. And they said, well, of all of them, there was really only 2, and they only spoke on some very low-level layer, but didn't really come out and address the entire issue. There's some scientists and some of these professors and some people who depend on the government for funding or the military. They don't want to talk about it because if they know that we're going to find out about it, eventually we're going to say no. We don't want the health effects. We see what is going to happen, and we're going to say no. And so as long as they can keep it in the conspiracy theory realm, which the Air Force desperately works at doing, as well as NASA, then we can continue doing what we do.
This planet has been around, science says, for 4.5 billion years. It's got an ecosystem of its own. Things have been going along quite well since the formation of this planet and its ecosystem. What makes mankind think, hey, I can do one better?
Because they like the physics, they like the science, they like the funding, and they want to be able to experiment. And so the thing is that, in other words, instead of doing something that would benefit all of mankind, maybe, what they're doing is they're conducting experiments which could destroy this structure, and maybe they already have in some ways. And that's why we feel that the sun is too hot, that things aren't normal, is because they have been playing so long with different types of experiments that they've really damaged the ionosphere and these other layers that surround us and protect us. And see, the thing is that when they say, well, doomsday is coming, if they would leave things alone, the Earth and the Earth's atmosphere has protected us for millions of years. And all of a sudden now scientists think that they are arrogant enough to believe that they're the new stewards and the new gods, and that they can conduct all these experiments as a physics laboratory, and that there won't be any consequences. I think that they're just conducting it because they think of themselves as being bulletproof, essentially.
Well, I find that this is just an absolute. I personally take offense to the fact that they're doing this to the environment, and the fact that the ecosystem is so incredibly fragile, and they take it for granted. A lot of people do, but the fact that our media these days doesn't do their job, and they don't hold these people accountable, makes it the responsibility of us, the people, to do what we're doing now. That's one of the reasons why we do this show, is because somebody's got to do it, and that's why you do your research, and why Griff does his research. It's because somebody has to do it. So, Rosalind, if you approach somebody that has never had any exposure to this before, but went and asked you the question, what the heck is that up in the sky? And the reason why I say, consequently, is that happened to me today. Somebody came up to me and says, I've heard you talk about that stuff before, but I've really never noticed it. What is it? How would you explain it to them so that you don't scare them away?
Well, what I explain to them is that there's some atmospheric experiments going on, and that one of them is that jets leave these contrails that persist for hours at a time, and that they do have negative consequences on us. And so then what I explain is about photosynthesis and weather modification, and I try to explain that this isn't good for us. In other words, what these man-made clouds do, what the haze does, in other words, in increasing asthma and different things. And I try to get them so that they're not scared off that, well, it's either a conspiracy theory and we're going to go to the chemtrail issue and then there's doubt. I try to kind of tell them a story so that they have something that they can actually look at some documents, they can actually have and understand a little bit about what's going on. And when you talk to most people and you say someone's modifying their weather, people take exception to this. They don't want someone to modify their weather or change it or make it worse. And so they get this on a very understandable level, that their solar panel, when you have these man-made clouds and you can watch the jets and see them expand and see these cirrus clouds and haze and different kinds of formations and black contrails, all of this. When people start to see this and they begin to realize that their plants aren't growing well, they begin to realize that it changes the weather. They can understand that. If you tell them that, well, this is, a different project and you get highly technical in the beginning, you not only lose them, but you lose the sense of how what's going on in the skies relates to them directly. So that's what I try to do, is I try to tell a more basic story rather than a complicated story.
That certainly seems like a good strategy. John, you had something to say?
Yes. What I would like to say is most people complain about the government and the taxes. They go out and they work all day, and a good portion of their work goes towards taxes, and that gets them upset at the government. Now to realize that the government is raining on my parade or my picnic, of course that's going to set me off even further, because we've been taught all throughout our school lives that the ecosystem and the environment is a very fragile thing and can tip either way at the slightest movement. And now we've got these people that think they're gods playing with the environment and the atmosphere, making it rain, making it too hot, making it too cold, making it snow. This is insane.
Yes, and you have to look. It is. But you have to look at MIT Professor Emanuel, who has been on television, and he's talked about where a fleet of jets could release carbon black, which is soot, on the West Coast. And if they released it, it would create these weather perturbations, as he called it, and it would start these storms moving across the United States to the east, which would grow in intensity. The ultimate goal is to have such an intense storm go across the United States that it would push hurricanes off the East Coast in Florida and the southern states and various areas. Well, what happens is they know that this would work. So we see sometimes cloud cover and these black contrails hitting us, and then all of a sudden when we follow them, we see the weather patterns. There's flooding in the Midwest. We see all these strange lightning strikes, and we see unusual lightning here in California, and no one says, well, Eglin Air Force Base is doing lightning modification experiments. Here's the universities, and I have a list of them, that are conducting lightning experiments along with private individuals and corporations. So all of this is going on, and we say, well, we can blame everything on global warming because it's a global warming problem, but it's an aviation problem. It is all these weather modification programs, which are ongoing. There's 60 in just the western states right now that are current and ongoing. Some of them cover and encompass an area in square miles that's bigger than the entire state of California. We have probably about between 25 and 30 of them right here in California, ongoing all the time by private corporations, private individuals, cities, states, federal government. Everyone is modifying the weather. And when you say, well, how come our weather isn't right? That's one of the reasons. And people are beginning to see these programs and who's doing them, and they're beginning to understand that their weather might not be so much related to quote-unquote global warming. It might be related to the experiments that we're conducting ourselves.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I know for me, being in North Carolina, we've experienced the hottest summer that I can remember. And it's been over 60 days now of over 90-degree weather. That we had a stretch for a while, and Griff can say, because he lives about an hour or so away from me, where we were reaching 100 degrees consistently every day, and that's just not natural for this area. Also, where I live in the Great Dismal Swamp. So you can imagine that there's normally no shortage of rain. And this year what we're seeing is an incredible dry spell. I mean, what we do is we get a big giant thunderstorm every time this show broadcasts. which causes me to drop out